Hey everybody, welcome back. Coffee on a Tuesday and vlog 53. Here's a story and a theory. In the 15th century, a dynastic civil war known today as the War of the Roses resulted in the annihilation of virtually every member of the British aristocracy. In the end, it was Henry Tudor, a distant cousin of the Lancaster family, who in 1485 ascended to become King Henry VII. Now, to keep order, Henry has to build himself an aristocracy. The only problem is all the royals are dead. So what does he do? He pulls people up from the petty nobility, the lower classes, and by introducing social mobility to Western society, he initiates what is arguably the most important movement in all of human history: modernity. It might be hard to imagine since it's so much a part of our lives today, but before this, social stratification was rigidly fixed. You were born into a class and you stayed there for life. And as the hierarchy was determined by God, people literally thought it was impossible to change their status. The providential plan was the providential plan. Did old Henry know what he was doing? No, he was acting out of necessity. But all of a sudden, what the public thought was impossible was happening right in front of their eyes. A massive change in culture, for many, a positive one. And because it was so positive, people began to reorganize the rules of their symbolic reality to accommodate. I talk more about symbolic reality in vlog 46, Time. Essentially, it's the symbols and logics by which we live our lives. For the first time in history, the word nation became synonymous with the word people. People began to govern themselves, make their own laws, and God steadily lost influence in both political and human affairs. But in the midst of all these positive changes, something very dark and very troubling was stirring beneath the surface. The world's very first mental institution, a place called Bedlam in London, began to take on more and more patients. Cries so hideous and so great shook the inner walls, according to one resident. What was happening? Well, the widespread psychological diseases we know today as manic depression and schizophrenia were being diagnosed for the very first time. In feudal England, a society where your lot in life was ordained by God, personal crises, what undermines these illnesses, were uncommon. You can't really fail at what you are because your identity in a system like that was secured at birth. In the new system, the system of social mobility and ambition, another word that enters common usage at that time, choice becomes a part of the equation. The responsibility falls off God's shoulders and onto yours. Suddenly, you can fail at becoming what you want to become with no one to blame but you. This was the bittersweet upshot of the new modernity. While many were reaping the positive rewards of climbing the social ladder, others were plunging into personal crises by failing to do so. No longer secured by the class of your birth, personal identity needed something to balance out the dark side of modernity. Enter Will Shakespeare. When new worlds are birthed from older, failing ones, new logics fill the vacuum from pieces made of the old. It takes an imagination of a truly great stature to see and think through, in essence, create the principles by which the rest of us can live our lives in the new world. That kind of person, the rarest of rare, we call genius. Around 1593, at the height of this cultural upheaval, Shakespeare writes Romeo and Juliet. In this play, we have basically the rule book, the best definition of what we know today as love. No text before this elevates love to such an incredible height. No text gives it the same quality and value in language, the most important of symbolic systems. Shakespeare's mind was in extraordinarily close coordination with the world around him. He could see what was happening to the people of London. The city, like most cities, played host to a number of the mentally disabled, most of whom had nowhere to go and so remained homeless. Shakespeare sees it all, and we get amazing diagnostic insights into these conditions in plays like King Lear and Hamlet. In Romeo and Juliet, he offers a solution. Love, the poet writes in Sonnet 116, is the star to every wandering bark. In other words, the North Star to every wandering mind. Shakespeare effectively establishes love's transformative power, a power for the average citizen that it did not have before. This kind of love is identity affirming. To find a Romeo or a Juliet is to find someone who will reinforce your own positive identity as a person in love. An extremely powerful symbolic logic. Its power evidenced by the sheer turmoil of heartbreak. And Shakespeare, being a writer for the common man, makes it something that is applicable to anyone, rich or poor, wherever you stand in the now chaotic social hierarchy. In essence, and as you know it, Shakespeare invented love. Down the generations, we can see the impact. Shakespeare has done more to define the current reality still than any other person or group of people since. He brought the culture into his mind at a critical historical moment, dissected it, thought through the logic, and expressed it for all of us in achingly beautiful verse. Now, you may wonder about texts like the Odyssey, or Plato's Symposium, or Dante's Vita Nuova, because there are accounts in those of love. Or it may nag at you that if what I said is true, that love is somehow a sham. As for those texts, it's perhaps worth it to say that both affection and love were around before Shakespeare. But the quality of love as we conceive of it today, the Hollywoodness of it, the applicability to all, the identity-affirming power is, I think, what Shakespeare brought into the culture. As for feeling that love is a sham, you shouldn't. What you feel today when you're in love is completely and totally real, and the identity-affirming power of it is real too. This is how symbolic reality works. It changes over time, and what's real to you and the culture at large is what's real. Shakespeare is not a genius because of his intelligence. He's a genius because of his powerful imagination, his symbolic imagination, his ability to bound through steps of emerging logics and work out new conclusions. What's incredible is that we all possess the exact same ability. That's the spectacular interplay between culture and the mind. The latter can revolutionize the former. We have only to take those symbols back into our mind and, like the great man, think them through again. I have to thank my sociology professor from BU, Leah Greenfeld, who introduced me to these ideas of symbolic reality and this crazy theory about Shakespeare. I'll put a link in the description where you can read more from her. She's really, truly incredible. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Tumblr or Twitter, links in the description. I will see you next time.